welcome to this first council work session of the 2020 year. So happy New Year, everybody, and welcome. Before we get down to the agenda items, the first item is committee reports and items of interest. And so I know the manager has some things. So Emily, Betty, anybody else? Claire? All right. Take it away, Emily.
Thank you. At the Downtown Eugene Merchants meeting this last week, Chief Skinner came, and a pretty exciting report. All of the officers are back downtown, all 9 of them. And so we'll have an increased presence. And also we will have 2 officers on duty from 4 in the afternoon till 2 in the morning, Wednesday through Sunday. And weekends have been very problematic. So this is a big step. I'm pretty excited about it. You know, the bridge funding and so on. We're starting to see some results of that money. Also very exciting, the city and the county are opening 64 more beds at dusk to dawn. We'll have a capacity of over 250. It's going to cost $257,000, which the county and the city are splitting. Also, the service station across the street, which supplies food, day shelter, laundry, showers, was going to cut hours to just mornings. And with the city and the county and St. Vinny's working together, it's going to stay open. That costs $91,000. Mackenzie-Willamette Watershed Report. There was a really good presentation on their second year of opening up streams to allow more fish, and it's working. The Human Rights Commission will be marching at 9 o'clock at PK Park on Monday the 20th for Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday celebration, ending at the Shed at 11 for a program and award presentation. So that's some pretty happy news. Happy New Year.
Betty?
Thank you. I have a few things. What I've been hearing from constituents, people are saying, why can't we license cats? I've had a few people say that. That's a recurring theme over the years, but it's coming up again. And I think even cat owners wouldn't object to a license.
I would. I own 2 cats.
You don't want to pay for a license?
I'd advocate.
Don't take that out of my time. Okay. I had a complaint about, now at Skinner Butte Park, there's a sign that says you can only park for 2 hours. And people who want to fool around in the park want to stay there longer than 2 hours usually. And I've been asked, why would you say only 2 hours for a park? And I don't know why. And a number of people have said, please don't allow e-scooters. And those are the things I'm hearing from constituents. Then from myself, ST short-term rentals, I think it's really urgent. I think we should do something sooner than we're planning to. They are growing. It is an urgent thing. We hear that we're short of housing, and short-term rentals are taking up some of that housing. And it will get worse as 2021 approaches. So I hope we can do something sooner. ARAPA board met on Thursday, and one of the things we heard about was we have two monitors for toxins, air toxins now, one at Amazon Park and one on Highway 99. And surprisingly to some people, the one at Amazon Park is picking up a lot of toxins, including formaldehyde, which if you want to be pre-embalmed would be convenient. Actually, it's not that much formaldehyde, but there are toxins there. And when someone asks, why would there be, when there are no industries nearby, why would you have toxins? And the answer is human beings make them. And then I ask, well, if we implement House Bill 2001, and there are more human beings in a confined, somewhat confined air shed, won't that increase the toxins? Well, of course it will. And it will get worse if we do that. Yesterday, this is Monday, isn't it? Yesterday, I was asked to administer the oath of office to the new members of the Wayne Morse Historical Park Corporation Board. And a part of that was they were asked to repeat a quotation by Wayne Morse, which I would like to read because I think it's relevant in this election season especially. And these are the words of Wayne Morse. I will exercise an independence of judgment based on the evidence of each issue. I will weigh the views of my constituents and party, but cast my vote free of political pressure and unmoved by the threats of loss of political support. I think that's a good thing for us all to think of, especially when people are running for re-election. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire?
So I get to follow banning toxic people and their unlicensed cats from fooling around in the parks.
I was going to go off and riff on that one too, but okay.
That was a lot, Betty.
There are no cats, no cats in the park.
No unlicensed cats in the park.
No, the cats are fooling around in them.
So I, over the break, had an opportunity to meet with a couple of members of the Citizens Climate Lobby, and I think some of my fellow councilors have met or have been reached out to by these same folks who are interested in asking this council to endorse a federal act, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which is now in the House and possibly may be introduced in the Senate as well. I just was appointed by the mayor to the Intergovernment Affairs Committee, and so I'm actually would like to speak with staff for that before I make any formal proposals that we take it up, but I'm just wanted to let you know there is interest in the community to have council to endorse this act. And from my understanding of it, it aligns in many ways with our Climate Energy Action Plan. And I don't believe it contradicts those goals in any way. So I believe I will be seeing Ethan, although it's not an IGR meeting, I'll be seeing Ethan, the staff person, on Wednesday, and I will chat with him about this, and then council may see a motion at a future meeting to endorse. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? I'll turn it over to the city manager.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of things. I've been busy while you've been gone. Some of the things that you know about, because I've been trying to send you some emails and just keep you updated, but a couple of them I thought would be good for the general public. The first one being that we did move the action on the CAP 2.0 back. We haven't set the date, but we're anticipating early spring. The purpose of that was really, we feel like we have a really solid draft, great work by Chelsea and the team, but we're consistently hearing that people want to be more engaged in it. They want to see more actions in it. We've met with a number of people and agree that it would really benefit from that. And so I know the mayor is going to reconvene sort of the Mayor's Ad Hoc 2.0, and we'll be getting together with that group to kind of co-create how we land this in a way people can just have more support for the plan. So we'll probably hear about that tonight, I'm guessing. I also wanted to just highlight that we did send a press release out today, too. I sent you an email about adding beds at the Dusk to Dawn shelter site out on 99. We've had a pretty consistent waiting list of 50 people, and so we expanded it by 64 beds to try to accommodate that. At the same time, we're still working pretty fast towards trying to get the 75-bed shelter sited as well. So we'll keep trying to take care of problems that are happening right now and also get ahead of it a little bit. Two other things I just wanted to mention that since you've been talking about snow and ice, we updated our snow and ice plan this year based on, or our snow and ice emergency plan based on some of the last couple of years' events. And this last year's event, we have not received our FEMA dollars yet, but we know what it's going to be, and we pre-ordered and purchased 6 additional plows. Some of them smaller, so they have a lot more flexibility to get in some of the difficult spaces. So I think learning from that and making some investments, if we do end up with snow, it should be a better experience for our community, and we'll continue to adapt that as we go forward. And then the last thing, I wanted to introduce Brooke. I think you all met her, but we have a new CMO division manager, Brooke Freed. And if you can recall, this position is kind of one of those legacy positions at the city that you always remember who was in them. So since my career, I know it was Mary Walston, Kelly Osborne, Mia Carriaga. We had Becky DeWitt, and we've just had Jen Yettis Vanderhagen, and now we'll have Brooke Freed. And so you're joining a great team of legacy leaders. She's come from the University of Oregon and has been working as the Assistant Dean of Operations and Administration in the College of Design, has a lot of experience in strategic planning and operations. And I think also earned her MPA, so her Master's of Public Administration, and is one of the students who took John's course. So the investment in letting John teach that course is already paid off by bringing talent straight to our team. And we're really lucky to have her. So wanted to welcome her.
Thank you for all of that, and welcome, Brooke. I have just two quick things. One is you all received email from BEST and AARP about walk audits, and their proposal is to do walk audits in each of the 8 wards. I have done walk audits in Ward 7 on River Road. It's actually a really interesting experience, and so as they reach out to you, I would encourage you to take them up on those invitations. It's a really great way to kind of connect with that neighborhood and have constituents know that you've kind of walked their walks and you know what their issues are. That's the first one. And then the second one is you all also have received emails from the folks advocating for star voting. And I will just say that we are now tentatively have that on the agenda for April 8th. So we will come back with a work session. We're not pushing for a May timeline, but we are pushing to get to that as quickly as we can, given the other things on the table and counselor absences, because we have several counselors gone in March. So that's where that landed. And with that, we are ready to move into our first item, our process session.
Yeah, I think I'm turning it over to Beth to kind of lead us off on this.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. This work session is an opportunity for you to discuss potential changes to several of your processes and will include an in-depth discussion of ways with which to make the public forum more effective for everyone. Jason and I spoke with each of you prior to the council break, and our presentation will include a synthesis of what we heard, a report on some of the actions we have already taken or plan to take in response to your suggestions and concerns, and options from which you might consider making other changes. The first topic that we're going to go over is the agenda schedule. And as you know, staff piloted a 2-week schedule for council packet delivery for almost a year now. The feedback we received from you was mixed, with some preferring a transition back to a 1-week schedule and some expressing frustration with the piecemeal delivery of council items when they're not ready for processing at the 2-week mark, and the confusion that that can also create for the public. Concerns were also expressed about the impact of the new schedule on staff and their commitment to provide detailed and timely information. Whether council chooses to return to a 1-week delivery schedule or keep the 2-week schedule in place, staff commits to the early outreach on or release of background information whenever possible. And on this, we're just asking for your direction on whether to return to a 1-week schedule or continue with the 2-week schedule or consider other options. And we're here to help with that discussion.
Okay, I have Emily and Betty and Claire and Jennifer and Mike and Chris. Okay, Emily.
Thank you. I really appreciate all the effort it takes to put those, these blue pages together. I really depend on them. So I was excited when we were going to get them more in advance. But I know not every time they come do I get that Thursday night, starting looking at what we're going to do 2 weeks in advance. The only problems I had when we were doing 1 week is when we would get something on Thursday that was for Monday. Because if I wasn't available during the weekend, it really crunched me to have enough time to look at it. And I know it's on the tentative agenda. It's not like it's a total surprise most of the time. But that's the one time it's difficult for me. Betty and I were talking today and wondered if we could do 1 week but come out on Wednesday. So that was a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, Betty.
That's what I was going to say. If we could get it on Wednesday, 1 week would be fine. But sometimes Thursday is, if you have weekend plans or weekend guests or something, it makes it really difficult. And sometimes the Thursday thing doesn't come till Friday, too. So, but I think Wednesday would be good enough. I don't think we need it 2 weeks in advance. When I get it that early, I have to find a place to put it. The one that's coming up is somewhere in a dresser drawer. I'm not sure where.
Claire?
Thank you. Well, I like that suggestion. I didn't really like the 2-week schedule, partly for one of the reasons, Ben, you just stated, that I would lose track of which agenda was coming up when, even though they all have the dates right at the top, right? It just adds a little extra layer of confusion. And it was frustrating when staff wouldn't be ready because it was too far ahead of time to have gathered all the pertinent information. I very much appreciate the suggestion of just adding one day, extending it one day, if that's workable for staff. I think that's a great idea, and I would support going back to the 1-week schedule. I would support going back to the 1-week schedule irregardless, but recognizing that there is sometimes that time crunch. I think, though, having it come out on a Wednesday would help. But that also gives us a full extra day if there's something in there that we need to ask a staff member a question about to actually have better chance of reaching that staff member, whereas if we get it Thursday afternoon, then we really only have Friday and maybe Monday. And for those of us who work, that's not always even a possibility. So thanks for that suggestion.
Jennifer?
Yeah, so I actually like getting it 2 weeks ahead, but maybe I am in the minority. But I totally recognize that seems like it's not really working. So being realistic, I think the extra day does help. Having 2 business days to contact people is a lot better than 1. I'm wondering if also for things that are, I don't know what the best word is, extra meaty, if we could have some kind of effort to get it a little bit earlier, like maybe things like the supplemental budget or something where it's probably going to take us a little extra time to dig through it. That would be at all possible. I would appreciate that.
Great. Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with everything Claire said, regardless of her use of the word irregardless. But I really, that's fine, that timing of the meat of stuff. I do have an issue, though, with us getting contextualized presentations at the table, which then tend to dominate the conversation and have them be substantively different in the way that they're presented in the materials that come in the packet. In other words, they're most of the time they're just going to be the boiled down version for presentation so we can see it. But there are, for me anyway, several times when we won't get kind of the understanding of the discussion we're going to have until we get at the table and we see this, where I would really love to be able to see this and understand the discussion we're going to have in advance. So I know that's asking a lot to say, have their presentation ready a week in advance, because that can be hard to do. I would have a hard time with that too all the time, right?
Sometimes those are still being tweaked the same day.
Right up to the end,
Still
sure.
getting
And that makes
information.
perfect sense. But that's my only thing, is that a lot of times, we get these at the table and this is the first time we see at least some of it. So
That makes sense.
that part's done. Are we going to do this topic by
Yes, we
topic?
are.
So
Yeah.
public forum is
We'll-
coming next?
Yes, so we have.
Okay.
We have kind of 3, what we consider sort of housekeeping things, and then we're going to shift from Beth over to Jason, who's going to do a more facilitated conversation about the forum.
Then I'll reserve my remarks regardless of what else we
Excellent.
discuss until then.
Excellent. Good self-restraint. Okay. Chris?
Yeah, I found the 2 weeks a little bit problematic because we would have to keep amending the agenda, because it would come out and then you'd have to amend it because it was different. So just wait a week, and that way you only have to get it once. But I do really like the idea of doing it on Wednesday instead of Thursday. I think the extra day isn't going to be too much of a heavy lift, but it will give us an extra day to read. It's really governed by the no surprises notion. So a lot of the agenda is something that's just basically a week is plenty of time to have it, or from Wednesday to Monday is plenty of time. But as Jennifer said, if there's a meaty topic, if there's something that's been going on for a while or it's got a fair amount of complexity, it doesn't have to be an agenda item summary with the packet, but some additional information, some background on it can be just sent out as you have it. And then it can be assembled into the full agenda that we get on Wednesday. but at least we have an alert to it ahead of time. And I think that might be the best balance for how we can not be surprised, but still not have to get something that keeps having to be amended because it changes.
Alan or Greg, do either of you want to weigh in on this?
I never used the full 2 weeks for that. I always read my packet the weekend before, so it didn't impact me one way or the other unless it got in the way of our ability to get things done, and sometimes it did by not having a packet there, or it's being amended, and I didn't know which one was going forward. So I noticed there's lots of second packets, and so shifting back to 1 week is fine with me.
Okay. Greg, any comments?
1 week.
1 week, okay. So would it help if we voted on this so that it's very clear? Oh, sorry, Mike, you want a second round? Go for it.
I was going to say one thing about the agendas and all the packet information. 14 long years ago, when Alan and I began this journey across the table from one another, to be charitable, I will say we both came up with the same idea at different times and places. And we still don't do it even though the technology makes it simple now. And it's to have the subject matter of an agenda item indexed electronically so that when we're going to talk about land use, when we're going to talk about Parks and Rec, we have a link to a page with all the other discussions that we've had about those, with all the other materials we've gotten before about that, since everything that we're doing electronically should be able to make a new page where those things live, the index page for that subject matter, and maybe some subjects, some agenda items are on multiple subject matter pages, but it allows us to get background quickly, and having some keywords highlights to an index page shouldn't be that tough to do. And I'm not suggesting we go back a million years and index everything, because that'd be a lot of time and money, but at least, start today, move forward, go back a ways if we can, kind of thing, Yeah, I mean, and the farther back you go, it becomes less relevant, but at least the last year or two worth of some important stuff we've talked about, it helps refresh the things that we've seen before or done before, I would think, too. So, just an idea, again.
We have a motion. Do we want to modify that a motion to specify?
You have a motion?
Yes, on the,
I don't have it.
no, you do, it's right here.
You can
right here.
modify it.
Oh, that's,
Wednesday.
that's the election of council
You
officers.
don't have your, here, sorry. Here.
Okay. Yeah, I did have this somewhere. Move to return to a 1 week agenda delivery schedule, but changing the date to Wednesday.
Second.
All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Oh, I have
7,
it
8.
right here.
Excellent. Okay,
Da,
thank
da,
you.
da, da.
That passes. That's great. All right, next item.
Thank you.
First date of the year.
It was easy, right there, boom.
On my agenda.
Out of the chute.
The next agenda topic is an opportunity for council to consider whether to change when certain items are regularly scheduled. Traditionally, the agenda follows a schedule that places public forum at the beginning of each meeting, followed by consent calendar, then action items. When time allows, action on consent calendar items is sometimes taken at the end of the 5:30 meeting. With a trend towards longer public forums, council may consider whether to routinely schedule consent calendar before the public forum, with the understanding that specific items on the consent calendar may be pulled for comment or action after the public forum if it is known or anticipated that there will be testimony on that topic. Committee reports and items of interest is usually scheduled as the first 5:30 PM work session item, but is often bumped or postponed to accommodate emerging items. Additionally, when resolutions or important motions are introduced by councilors during items of interest, it can result in either significantly abbreviating the time left for scheduled work session topics or displacing them altogether. So we're just looking for direction from council on whether to pilot a change to the regular order of items that would schedule committee reports and items of interest and the consent calendar as the first items at the 7:30 meeting.
Okay, great. I have Betty and then Mike so far, and Chris. Okay. Take it away.
Okay, I think that the items of interest and reports should stay at the 5:30 meeting. We have trouble getting in all the people who want to speak at the public forum sometimes already, and I don't want to infringe on the public forum time with items. I think that having at the beginning of the 5:30 meeting is, works fine and should stay there. Thank you.
Okay. Mike?
I want to infringe on the public forum and have the items be at the 7:30 meeting. I think that that's a very important agenda item for me as a place to bring up alternative ideas that would not normally make it onto the schedule, and motions that individual counselors feel passionate about, whatever they happen to be. So either way, I would hope that's still the appropriate forum for and the freedom to do that. Frankly, I don't care that much where we schedule it, but I think the work sessions are already jam-packed full of stuff we need to do, and we are more likely to see the efficient use of items at the council meeting, besides the fact that that's the way we always did it until a year or two ago, a couple of years ago. We always had it at the 7:30. But I would say that, again, I'm looking forward to the discussion on public forum, because I hope we can not limit the number of people who speak, but limit the amount of total tonnage of speaking.
Okay. Chris?
I'm looking to try to achieve the greatest efficiency. And so actually, I would think just try to be flexible. I would think it's fine to do the consent calendar at the 5:30 meeting, except there are people who may want to come to speak to consent calendar items. Things like approving minutes and calendars and stuff like that. So if you wanted to take the consent calendar and say, what are those things on there that somebody might potentially want to talk about? Those should be at the 7:30 meeting. But if time allows, if we can dispose of some routine stuff before the 7:30 meeting, I'm fine with that. I don't have a preference either way with regard to items of interest. Once again, for the sake of efficiency, I would just do wherever it seems like it's going to fit the easiest. So I don't have a firm idea of where it should be. Just it has to be somewhere so that we have the opportunity to do it. But I just want to do it in the most efficient way so that we can get on with the business of getting our work done.
Okay. Claire?
Thank you. I wonder, so in terms of the consent agenda, I'm agnostic where we land with that, if it stays where it's been or move it to 5:30. I agree there's some validity that there are people who sometimes come and speak to the items on that agenda, and we should be mindful of that. As far as committee reports and items of interest, I think there's some value in moving it to the 7:30 meeting, where we generally have more of an audience than we do at our 5:30 work sessions. And oftentimes, councilors have been using items of interest as an opportunity to broadcast a message to the public. So unless you're watching the webcast or the cable cast, you know, people aren't hearing it. And I think we would have more people hear those pieces of public information at the 7:30 meeting. And so recognizing that if we moved it there, it might impact public forum and how much time we have there, you know, maybe we could do it as a pilot, the way that we did when the schedules were published, and do it for 6 months and see if it, you know, how counselors feel about whether it was worth the trade-off, didn't have an impact, had too great an impact. But I would be interested in trying that out.
All right. Alan?
I think the operative or most important phrase in this whole section right here is in the first sentence, where it says, with the ongoing impacts on well-attended public forums and the high demand for work session time. I think we're adding a Wednesday and we're adding a Monday because we don't have enough time to do work sessions and do deliberation and take action. In part, that has nothing to do with these items, and mostly has, in my mind, has to do with the forum and how much time it takes. And so I agree with my colleague, Mike, that reducing the tonnage in different ways, and we'll have that conversation. So when we're talking about the forum, I'll bring this back up, that we're adding time because we don't have enough time to deal with this. As far as the items of interest, I think it would be better if they were at the 7:30 meeting before the public forum. I think that's a better place to put them. They're more accessible to people, and maybe they'll have a little bit more import. I think we emphasized those. I used to emphasize those because it was a good way to get an idea of what other counselors were doing in the communities they were assigned, but we don't really do that. So it's just more of items of interest now. And the consent calendar, we didn't used to actually have most of the things that are on the consent calendar. The things that are problematic are the annexations and land use. And we moved them into consent calendar, and those are the ones that have become problematic, where people would do that. So if we took those out of, put them back where they were, which are separated items where we'd take action on each one of them, then all the stuff that's automatic can be in the consent calendar, and it can go before the public forum and get that stuff out of the way. But if we just pull that stuff out and make it be regular items, that probably works better. I think it worked better before, because those are the items that get talked, that have the high potential getting talked about in the public forum.
I just want to make a comment about that. We do try to vet through which ones we put on the consent calendar, and we meet every Thursday morning to go over the council schedule for the next 30 days, and we go through every single item and ask, what are people hearing? What are they hearing in the community? And we typically only put items on the consent that we know we've either heard nothing about or is very supported, or we've been in real communication. Like tonight, I think will be an example of that. So it makes sense what you're saying, but I think we do also, if we know something is going to be brought up and people are going to express concern, we try not to put those on the consent calendar.
God, I'd never try to do that.
Okay, Emily.
Thank you. About the consent calendar, unless there's something we want to pull, it takes no time at all. So if we start taking things off of the consent calendar to vote on them individually, we're now adding a bunch of time to our work session. So I'm totally fine with the way it's been. It really isn't that often that something gets pulled off, and it's often just pulled off for a 2-minute clarification. So it hasn't mattered to me whether we did it at the end of the 5:30, the beginning of the 7:30, or after the forum. I think of those three, I would choose after the forum, just in case somebody wanted to speak to one of those items. And usually it's just a quick, we all vote for it. As far as the items of interest, I am really interested in doing it at the 7:30 meeting, except that sometimes we really seems to have a discussion that's timely that we're not wanting to put off to another work session. And that does, like, you know, if all of a sudden we take 20 minutes, half an hour to talk about something and the whole forum has to wait, that feels problematic to me. And what I've done when we do it at the 5:30 meeting is, if I can fit it in appropriately, I do it during the comments to the forum. So I see advantages in both of those.
Okay, Mike, second.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree entirely with Alan that and would say further that the consent calendar, by its very definition, is non-controversial things that everybody should be able to just say, yeah, absolutely, unless they want to comment on it for its merit. But annexations often are, even when we don't know there's a problem up until the very end, but structurally, we can never do the consent calendar before the public hearing because there's an annexation that might be. And we don't know until we hear the public forum. So I have a small motion, maybe this will help. Move to remove all annexations from the consent calendar. That way we can do with it as we see fit. And once a month, have a regular agenda item after the public forum titled annexations, where they're all put together. Was that a second?
That was a second.
Sorry.
Any comments or questions on that motion, Chris?
Would that create any sort of a challenge in terms of the timing for when certain land use issues need to be dealt with? I mean, if you said, let's save them all up till once a month, might that create a problem in some cases?
I'm just trying to think of the timelines, and I don't have them off the top of my head. I know that there is, we just looked at this when there was a request for the hearing around annexations, and I just don't have those off the top of my head. I don't think saving them up for once a month would actually be a problem. Saving them up every 6 months, I would be red flagging it.
May I friendly amend my own motion to say to be dealt with after public forum as a regular item, and if we don't have any, then we don't put them there.
That could work.
It could either be regular, or you could have like consent land use, and if it's.
Well, but consent is non-controversial.
No, I'm saying at the end, if.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah, exactly, but it's whatever you want to call it. I would put it under annexation so people know that's the thing to look for if they want to talk about it in advance.
So really, so what I hear, the purpose is just to really just pull annexations off of consent.
Because then we can put consent wherever it doesn't make any difference.
And we have to vote on them twice.
Betty, you have a comment?
I don't object, except I think it's bigger than that. I think anything that's controversial should not be on the consent calendar. Anything that's potentially controversial should not be on the consent calendar. I think I've said that before in the past, and I don't know that annexations covers it all. I can't think of an example right now, but I know there have been things that were there.
What I'm hearing, just a clarification, and then I'll let you speak. What I'm hearing, though, is that staff goes through a process, anything that they have heard public comment, and counselors can always reserve the right to pull something from the consent calendar, so that's not going away. You retain that right.
I understand that, but
Okay.
it has, I'm glad to hear that you're looking at it that way. It hasn't, I think it hasn't always been done.
Mike,
I'm
one-
almost kind of sorry I precursored it
Okay.
that way. Annexations are occasionally controversial, but yes, nothing controversial should be on consent calendar, agreed. But the only structural problem is that if we want to do consent calendar at 5:30, we end up never being able to if there are annexations on it. And that's why just pulling these away will take that problem away, and we can do consent whenever it seems to work for us.
Oh.
Okay, Betty, go.
But if the consent calendar is not controversial, it doesn't take any time, takes a few seconds. So there's no point in doing it at 5:30 instead of 7:30, in my opinion.
I agree. I think it should come after forum. It doesn't take any time. We can always pull something and announce it before forum that we're going to pull something. My big problem with it is I don't want to have to separately vote on everything that's not controversial when we've been able to take care of it in 1 minute. And we don't pull all the annexations off of the consent calendar. We do it, but it doesn't seem all that often to me. So if we're talking about saving time, I would say let's just do it after the forum, and if somebody wants to pull something, we could say it before the forum.
So if I could just jump in and sort of summarize this a little bit. I guess the question is, what problem are we trying to solve by moving the consent calendar? And I'm not sure that there's a problem. So,
Yeah, I guess I'll chime in. I think one of the, I wouldn't say it's a problem. I think one of the advantages to doing it before the forum is you don't have 10 staff sitting in the back through the entire forum waiting for something that you just say yes to. And you shouldn't do it just for that. But if there's a way to accommodate that, that would be great. If we can't accommodate that, I think it depends also on how your conversation goes about the public forum. So we could just revisit this one too.
okay, yeah, thank you.
And there's a motion and a second on the table.
Yes, there is.
Right. Okay. So, okay, and can you read the motion? Can you?
I don't think I can.
I can be more brief.
Okay.
Annexations from the-
Move to separate out and remove annexations from the consent calendar and list them as their own individual item after public forum during regular council meetings.
As needed.
Okay, all right. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 opposed, 2. Okay, so that passes.
Okay, I just want to clarify how that would look like. So for tonight, you have 2 consent items. One of them is around a right-of-way issue, which I think you could technically, it's not an annexation, but there is an annexation. So instead of it being on consent, you'll have an action item. So you could, on some nights, have 3 additional action items. That's what you believe you voted on.
I was suggesting grouping them as
A-
annexations. Group them under consent calendar.
You can, I think,
List them as individual action items.
yeah, so, but your motion was listing them as individual action items. So if you wanted to group them, you can do that. There's nothing legally that prohibits it. But to get to the question regarding what problem are we trying to solve, if we are trying to get at the folks sitting here, a lot of them, oftentimes, many of the consent items are annexations. So we just want to, it's just about, do we want to take a new approach regardless of when the consent agenda actually occurs? Do you want annexations pulled off of it? It can be looked at and discussed as a separate question.
If I could, we always, as a matter of habit, though, wait on any annexation questions to vote consent calendar until after a public forum, whenever they are on. That's the
new.
reason for
We've
my,
recently started doing that. That hadn't always
it's a
been
year or
done.
2 ago, but
About a year
anyway, I don't want to debate with you if I could. The larger point for me was that, and I misspoke in saying individual action items. I did mean initially call them annexations as one item, no matter how many there are. So I just
List them
friendly amended
individually,
there, I
but
guess.
vote as a group.
Yeah.
Is your
Yeah,
intention?
because we don't want to have to add
Is there a way
27
to
items
modify what they just
if
did
we
to
can
make
add
that
one.
happen? List individually, but vote as a group, or can I just do that?
Well, the motion's been passed.
I guess it has.
So what Mike is explaining is what I understood his motion to be, so that's what I thought I was voting on.
Yeah, me too.
Because all we want to do is actualize your intent. So if that is what people, then
And
absolutely, that is.
the manner of dealing with them would be just like a consent calendar where you could pull them individually for individual discussion, but that they would be voted on once as a group.
If that's as people understood, that's great.
Okay, Alan?
When I thought you were talking about annexations, I thought you were talking about annexations and things like annexations that
Yes.
are land use related.
Right of
So
ways.
like, for instance, is right of way.
Yep.
Not technically an annexation, but, or swaps or
was
things like that. So that's what I thought you were talking about.
Yeah.
In fact, I said that it was annexations and land use things that were things that would get in the way.
Can we agree on legislative intent without another vote?
Yes.
That's what I meant too.
Okay.
Okay, there is still a part 2 to this related to committee reports and items of interest.
Okay. And I'm wondering if we can also pilot this for a period of time?
Yes.
So we can revisit it. We didn't put a time on it, but.
6 months.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. So,
Another case of sausage. Let's go.
so are you clear on the motion would be related to the agenda items, committee reports and items of interest?
Did we decide when we were doing those?
We haven't, so right now, what the motion says
Okay.
in your packet is move to pilot a change to the order of agenda items, scheduling committee reports and items of interest, drop out consent calendar before the public forum.
Yeah.
After the public.
I'm curious
After the
if
public
that's what you meant, though, by separating out the
Oh, no,
consent
so
land
this
use
would
piece.
still say there, so that, I'm just reading the motion as it is. And so just wanting to be clear about what you might vote on now and how it's currently framed in your packet.
What's the other?
So it's kind of gets back to the thing I raised, like, do you want to, as a separate issue, do you all as a body think it's a good idea? And I hear you, Counselor Clark, saying you want those annexations, regardless of when the consent agenda is heard, those annexations and other land use related issues should not be a part of consent agenda.
Correct.
So now, a separate topic for you to consider is when does consent, now that you've made that motion and that's clear to us, when do you want the consent agenda to come to you? Do you want to be talking about it before or after public forum?
Don't care now.
Well, and so it could be that the suggested possible motion is the motion you actually want in front of you.
Okay, I will vote against it anyway.
Okay, well, let's put it on the table and then,
Okay, I will read the motion here, and then we can discuss it. Move to pilot a change in the order of agenda items, scheduling committee reports and items of interest and consent calendar before the public forum at regular council meetings.
Second.
okay. Now, questions, comments? Alan?
It's a regular council meeting, 7:30?
7:30.
7:30, and not the public hearing evenings, so the second and fourth Monday of the month.
Okay, Mike?
I absolutely agree with this. Now consent calendar is that, and we'll have the opportunity. And I think when we do things, especially on the city's dime, it's important for the public to hear us talk about it and hear what we've learned or seen or done. So I'm in favor of it.
Okay, are you all ready to vote on this? All right, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 opposed, 1, so that passes. Thank you very much. Okay, and on to the third, what we thought would be speedy housekeeping items.
Next item is the operating agreement changes. Process sessions provide an opportunity to review the council's operating agreements and update them to reflect current council practices or other changes. I'll quickly go over the proposed changes, and then we can answer any questions. Section 1.02, work sessions, was updated to reflect the current practice of conducting noon work sessions on the second, third, fourth, and fifth Wednesdays of the month, and scheduling additional 5:30 PM work sessions on the third Mondays of the month as needed. Section 1.05, public forum, was updated to reflect the presiding official's prerogative to reduce testimony time when the number of speakers warrants such a reduction. Also, clarification was added reflecting our practice that speakers must be present to submit request to speak forms. A new section 3.06, action items, was added to clarify that, in general, action on ordinances and councilor-introduced resolutions will be placed on regular city council meeting agendas and will be scheduled after the public forum. And this does not preclude a councilor's ability to request action to occur at other times. 7.02 was updated to clarify that whenever possible or practicable, at least 24 hours notice is provided for all intended motions. Section 10.03, local expenses, was updated to reflect the current rate for bicycle mileage reimbursement, a rate that hasn't been updated since 2002. So that's now 26 cents per mile. And then Section 10.04, spouse guest expenses, was updated to replace all references to spouse with the word partner.
Okay. Yeah, I have Emily, then Alan, anybody, and Mike. Okay. Go for it.
Thank you. The first one, work sessions on the third Mondays of the month as needed. We've never not had one since we started doing that. So is that realistic that we wouldn't need one?
Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Okay, that helps. Got it. The one about the presiding official to change the testimony time, it's really hard if you've prepared 3 minutes to go to 2. And I think if we're going to do that kind of thing, we should just say it's 2 minutes and not be wishy-washy about it. Let people know what they've got, and then don't change it to 90 seconds. You know, just stick with whatever we say. My biggest problem is the action items after the forum. This has happened a few times with things that were fairly controversial. It didn't seem like we really needed a whole nother work session on them, but maybe we did. And if we have a long forum and it's something contentious, and especially if it's something I want to contend about, I'm thinking about it all during the first work session, all during the forum, and, 10 o'clock rolls around, people are tired, they want to go home, they don't want to talk about it anymore. So I feel like I'm not getting a due process of the question on the table when it's contentious and it comes after the forum. So I don't know what another solution is, but this has been a problem for me a bunch of times. And I will point out that the bicycle mileage also counts for walking, because otherwise I'm dragging my bike to work every day. And other than that, I'm fine.
All right, Alan.
On 1.02, does the as-needed apply to the Wednesdays and the Monday meetings, or is it just the Monday meetings?
It's just the Monday.
So the Wednesday,
Or prior to a public hearing night.
But it's the Wednesday.
yeah, I don't know that we need as-needed, but, because we are so short on time. Again, Emily, I think the problem is the length of the forums. That gets in the way of us doing business. So that's to me the issue. A separate issue on 3.06 is resolutions. It has always kind of bothered me and bewildered me of why resolutions are treated separately than anything else that we do. You can just bring up a resolution and it can get on the agenda really quickly, as opposed to any other kind of item that someone wants to bring up. And sometimes they're timely and sometimes they're not. But I've always thought the resolution should go through the same process that a work session poll goes through. That if you want to bring a resolution to council, whether it be a time-sensitive one or not, we could still deal with that, is that you put out a work session poll, and if 4 people say, yeah, I want to have a conversation about this resolution, just as you would any item, then it would fall under the same rules.
Second.
And so I'll make the motion to have resolutions be treated as work sessions, items from council through work session polls as well.
Second.
And they need to reflect the timeliness of them. So if they're, if they have to be done by a certain date because something's pressing or some issues come up, then they need to be dealt with that way.
Okay. Mike and then Claire.
I was just seconding it, but
Okay.
It's a new year, isn't it, Mike?
I will say that I find most of the resolutions we do, not all, time that I think is extremely poorly spent by this council. I don't think that our opinion on world events or even state events is as important as us spending time actually solving some of the problems of our city. And frankly, if we limited the resolutions we were capable of doing to 1 or 2 a year, I'd vote for that in a New York minute. So in this case, I think at least a little more vetting is the very, very least we should be doing.
Claire.
Thank you. So speaking to the motion, I don't object to the idea of having resolutions or new items from councilors coming through the regular process, but according to our operating agreements, there's 2 ways to do it. One is to contact the city manager and convince them to put it on the agenda along with the mayor, and the other one is a council poll. So I would accept applying those 2 standards to resolutions and other items. I used that process
It was just resolutions.
recently. Sorry, but in our, yes, but the item here speaks to other things besides resolutions, so.
Yeah, well, my motion was just related.
Gotcha. So as long as they would be subject to both possible processes, I would be okay. But if you're suggesting that resolutions can only be brought forward through a city council work session poll, I would not support the motion.
So Counselor Syrette's referring to 2.01 and 2.02, if you're looking at it in
You're
your.
on page 10 of our packet.
I'd actually say I didn't know that 2.01 was even on here because I don't think anybody uses that process.
Sure we do.
And it would be, that would be challenging to do that if each of you were coming and saying work session, work session, work session, work session. So I encourage you to continue using the polling process.
Okay.
Well, I'm still have time, so just to say, that was actually the process I used to get the affirming reproductive rights resolution before council, was the city manager and mayor agreed to put it on the agenda. I gave you all a heads up, but I didn't just introduce the resolution at a meeting. So,
Okay, I have Emily, and then I know Mike wants to speak again. Go.
And I've also had resolutions through the manager and the mayor. I'm really leery of saying we need to have a work session on every resolution. Some of them have been fairly straightforward, some of them weren't and could have used a work session. But if we're arguing about how we don't have enough time to do everything, I'm not sure I want to put a whole work session onto some of the resolutions that we do.
One possible hybrid, and I'll just put it out there, would be using the work session poll format to get a resolution agendized. So it wouldn't necessarily, so you wouldn't see an AIS on it, you wouldn't see a staff person staffing it, because that's a resource issue, but the work session poll would get it agendized on your 7:30 agenda. So it's an item, but it's gone through that first step to get it there.
Yeah, that's what I was,
Okay.
not necessarily.
It sounded like it was a mandatory work session if you agreed to the poll.
No, he said the process.
Chris?
Yeah, it's possible. I may be the only counselor who's ever introduced a resolution through a work session poll, which was shot down in enormous pieces. So it's having had the experience of having it lose that makes me support it. Because if you just bring up a resolution and we spend 45 minutes talking about it and it's going to lose anyway, that's a huge waste of time. And so I think the notion that the attorney brings up, which is put out a poll, doesn't have to be a work session, it's just a, do you want this on the agenda? And find out before you bring it up and we talk about it for 45 minutes and it loses. Because I've been there, and even though I lost, it was an efficient way to decide, to learn whether this council wanted to talk about it or not. So I would fully support the notion of putting out a poll that says, I'm wanting to introduce this resolution. Do you vote to do that? I think as part of that poll, you need to make sure it's clear on there that this resolution is being brought by a board or commission of the city. The Human Rights Commission has forwarded this resolution, so we have to take that into account when we decide whether we're going to shoot it down or not.
Okay, Jennifer.
Yeah, I think you have a good point, Chris. I had a question. So if this passes, then resolutions would have to go through the poll process, but other items could still use the city manager thing. To me, that seems a little weird. It's inconsistent, like how a resolution is so much different than any other issue that we talk about that they need special treatment. I don't know. That is just,
One step at a time.
that is what I am thinking about. I'm sharing it.
Mike.
Process question. I understand that right at this second, we're debating Alan's separate side motion here, and that's what we'll vote on in a moment. When we get done with that, are we voting on then a motion that would conscript all those other pieces of what was introduced here just a moment ago? Because there were several items, some of which I'm for, some of which I'm against.
Right.
We haven't gotten to all of those yet because we're on.
Okay.
We took a sidetrack on this
Are we
one.
going to do them one at a time?
We'll go, we didn't intend to, but we have to do what we have to do. So if you need to tease your way through them individually or pull out the ones that need more discussion, that's what we'll do.
I seconded and only spoke to that, but when it came back to me, I was going to say no, I wouldn't do the Monday nights, third Monday nights would be a no from me for work sessions. The fifth Wednesday, okay, fine. It's like a leap year, so fine. But I agree with Emily that never put a work session at the end of a 7:30 meeting agenda ever again, and we'll all sing and dance.
And also, just for by way of process, what you'd be doing, whether you do it individually or in a glom, you're going to be directing us to come back with a resolution to make the amendment. You won't be
So we can still
approving.
fix it later if we disagree. Got it. Thanks.
And just as clarification, the third Mondays are public hearing nights, which is why sometimes they get canceled if there's nothing for public hearing, right? Okay, Greg, did you want to comment?
I don't think it's broke. Why do we need to fix it? I mean, we don't have that many resolutions that come up, really. And, you know, I think the current process works.
Okay.
I was going to make a process recommendation.
Thank you.
Because I know that you really wanted to talk about the public forum, and I think that's going to take a lot of time. So I'm wondering whether, one of two options, whether you just quickly go around the table and just let us know the things in there that you're like, take it out, like what you just did, just kind of a quick round, and we could bring back an amended one for you to talk about in like a shortened work session time, like briefing or items or something like that.
After all.
That's an option. Or we could reach out to you again individually and just get your comments and bring back something that reflects what we think we're hearing.
Right, it would be nice to be able to have this last half hour for the public forum, but we do have one motion on the table,
Yes,
so we do need to vote on this one piece. So if you're ready,
What's the motion again?
this is the, do you want to frame
I
it?
get it wrong. It would be a motion that would use the work session process for agendizing on your 7:30 meeting resolution, the consideration of resolutions.
And so then you couldn't use the mayor-manager way anymore?
I don't think it prohibits use of the.
No, you still can.
You
That's still
can.
an option.
Mayor still gets to decide what's on the agenda either way.
Right, because the section actually says alternatively.
Right.
Right, yeah,
A question.
okay, yeah.
What does it change then?
It changes resolutions being just brought to and discussed at work sessions without some understanding whether at least four of you would like to be discussing the resolution. I mean, I think that's the,
You can't just walk in and make it.
It just gives
You
more,
can under items, but that's a whole other thing.
means there's more commitment to having that conversation before we take meeting time. Okay, let's vote on this motion. All in favor?
Just, sorry.
Oh, one more, okay.
What I just said is true, correct? That you could still bring a resolution under items?
Yeah.
this is, your intent was to change that, correct?
No, I understood his intent was the normal process wasn't to just ask the mayor and it's automatically there. It was to give it a filter, but not to limit our ability under items to bring up any motion we want to
You can make a motion anytime, anywhere.
at items.
Sure.
Okay, that's all I wanted.
But if it's resolution, this says you should, that you should use the work session poll process.
Should or must?
Should or must?
Should,
Good, fine.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay,
because you can't prohibit a counselor
Right.
from making a motion.
That's all I was checking on.
all right, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, opposed, 1, okay, that passes. So, on the remaining items of this, are there, Mike has already identified one that he has a question about. Are there others that,
Mine about the important decisions late at night after the
oh, important
forum.
decisions late at night is the other
pumpkin,
piece.
'cause-
And Jennifer, do you have
And
one?
I agreed with Emily's about switching the time on people. I'm not a fan.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that either. Let's
Want to do 2
pick a
minutes? Let's
time.
just do 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and we're rolling into a public forum conversation, so, okay. Claire?
So I actually disagree with that. I think the presiding official over the council meeting should have the discretion to decide. It should be used, carefully. But if you take away who's ever presiding over the meeting, that ability, I think that could actually lead to some train wrecks. And this, I agree with the complaint about not doing work at 10 o'clock, and it could actually push us to have meetings that go till 10:30, quarter to 11. So I think there has to be discretion from the person who's running the meeting. I do support the idea of not adopting 3.06 which is the action on ordinances and council-introduced relations or motions would be placed after a public forum. I guess ordinances is fine if they're not going to be a full work session. And I think those are my comments.
Okay. Anybody else need to add anything for the final discussion? Okay, so that wraps that tightly enough for the next step. Thank you very much. And now, We are going to roll into a broader conversation about the public forum and,
Put me in the queue.
Jason, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Jason Dedrick with the City Manager's Office. I am going to try to quickly walk you through what we heard from you in the conversations that Beth and I had talking about public forum. So our goal in those conversations was to understand a little bit about how you're thinking about public forum, what's working for you, what's not working for you. So what I'm going to present really quickly is sort of what we heard, as well as some ideas, suggestions we have on how to move forward from here. So there were four primary themes in the conversations that we had with you. The first of those was purpose of forum. So many of you commented on the fact that there isn't a real stated purpose for the forum currently in the operating agreements. You didn't necessarily mention that specifically, but sort of wondering, what is the purpose of forum? Does the community understand what it is? Do you as counselors understand what it is? And is what's happening consistent with whatever that purpose is or could be? So that was one theme. Another theme was equity and access. So does the community have reasonable access to public forum? How long do they have to wait? What is it like to try to sign up? Public forum happens downtown. Is that sufficient in terms of geography? So there were comments around that theme. Community member behavior, so that's during public forum as well as during the sign-up period, and then length of meeting. So those were the four key themes. I'm going to roll through what we heard from you in those themes, and then we'll move into what some ideas are going forward. So purpose of forum, our current purpose statement here in your operating agreements is pretty simple. It just says folks can come and talk about any topic except for those that have a scheduled public hearing, So it really doesn't speak much to what the purpose of forum is. Several of your comments in terms of themes were that public forum is an important component of the work that you do and of community engagement. And that in and of itself is an important finding, because we didn't hear consensus amongst you saying public forum is no longer useful, we shouldn't do it. So it was important that you were all saying it is an important component of involvement. We did hear you say the purpose seems unclear to community members when you're reflecting back on the kind of testimony that you get. You're wondering, do they understand what the purpose is and how to align that testimony with that? You also commented that their testimony that you hear has varying degrees of utility for you in informing your decisions. So one key purpose for you is to hear things from the community personally. Many of you mentioned with personal stories, personal reflections that will help you do the work that you need to do, and that happens to varying degrees. And then finally, comments about quantity versus quality. So you may hear on a certain topic from a tremendous amount of folks, how to balance that with the fact that sometimes the quality varies from individual to individual. Sometimes you only hear from one individual, but the quality of that testimony is quite good. What folks are bringing in their testimony varies widely, from reading research to giving a personal statement from the heart. And so just sort of this idea of that's a theme that you're interested in exploring about quality of testimony, and how does the fact that 27 people might come on one topic compare to only one person coming. So equity and access, there were several key ideas here. The first is that wait times to testify are discouraging, particularly for newcomers. So a lot of folks who come to forum for the first time don't understand that a lot of times the queue is starting out here at 5:30 or 6, and if you want to speak right away, you need to be here then and in line. And so the idea that someone shows up maybe at 7 thinking, or 7:15 thinking they're going to sign up and testify really quickly and then go home, and they don't realize that it's 2 hours and they need to hang around for that. And so that can be intimidating for folks or discouraging for folks. And sometimes when you have folks towards the end of the forum that aren't here, we don't track why that is, but we suspect for some of them it's because they weren't able to wait. Secondly, the idea that forum, because of when it's held, as well as not really knowing when you might testify and how long it might be, makes it difficult for those who might be using public transit or some other mode of transportation, because they aren't really sure when they're going to testify, and they may leave here at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. How does that sync up with bus schedules, walking around, things like that? So that was something that you mentioned. The idea of first come for the queuing process, that we maintain a line and people will testify in the order in which that they sign up. And so you had some concerns about what that means from an equity standpoint. If someone's working a job, they can't be here until 6:30, and by the time they get here at 6:30, 6:45, they're already the 40th person in line, for example. So what does that mean from an equity standpoint? And then finally, your desire to hear from new voices. We heard from you that you love hearing from new voices. What can you do potentially to structure public forum in a way where you're hearing more often from new members of the community? Around community member behavior, here are some of the things that we heard from you. For those that are coming to testify, concerns about the current environment not being welcoming for all community members. So sometimes folks particularly who might be new, or if it's a really contentious issue, there can be things happening in the audience in terms of side remarks or comments. Sometimes there are outbursts. The mayor does her best to try to rein that in, but that can create an environment that doesn't feel welcoming for everyone. We also have some issues with that, not a lot, but in the queuing in the lobby, that's an environment that we're sort of less able to control for that, and so that can occasionally be an issue. It's not a big issue, though. That's just for the folks that are coming. What we heard from you is some folks don't even want to come to testify because their perception is that it's not a welcoming environment, and that if they're going to come and speak on a certain issue with a certain position, that they may not feel that this is an environment that's conducive to doing that, or they may not feel safe or feel wanted. I'm not sure what the right, comfortable in that environment. So the idea that some folks may not be coming to testify at all because of that. Also that there are some issues with safety, also maybe just perception of safety in the meeting. So if you've got folks that are testifying approaching the dais with things, when we have large crowds in the audience, what does that mean from a safety standpoint for the meeting? So that came up. And finally, that managing behavior can be challenging. Almost all of you mentioned the difficult role that the mayor is in terms of presiding over the meetings and having to enforce behavior if that becomes an issue, and wanting her to have the tools necessary to be able to address behavior issues if they come up. And then finally, length of meeting was a topic that all of you mentioned. One of your concerns was that the length of public forum can impact your ability to do other business. I think you've talked about that. That's well known. Many of you had a positive response to what has happened much more frequently lately, the move to a 2-minute testimony. Your feeling was that you're getting the quality of testimony that you need to be able to take action on something, that you're getting someone's sense of where they are personally on an issue in 2 minutes. So you felt comfortable that 2 minutes wasn't a length of time that allows people to express what they need to express. It was mentioned just a few minutes ago, really wanting consistency for community members. So is it going to be 3 minutes? Is it going to be 2? You don't really mind which it is, but just let it be 1 and always be 1, because it can be hard to take your testimony and have to reduce it down to 2 minutes. It's almost easier to know that it's going to be 2 and just be prepared to do 2. Some of your suggestions about limiting the length of the meeting. So limiting the number of speakers per public forum, or limiting the session length of public forum to a certain number of minutes. Limiting the number of speakers per topic came up. Limiting the number of public forums per month. And then also the idea of limiting the amount of testimony per year per speaker. So obviously that would mean tracking if an individual has been here, maybe they get 15 minutes per year to testify. So that was another idea that came up. So you also asked us to look at what's happening in other cities around public forum. And so we did that. Here's just a quick sketch of some of what we found. So you're right in line with most other cities, 2 forums per month. Speaker time, as you can see, varies from anywhere to 1 to 6 minutes. You can see that there are a host of communities there that have chosen to limit their forum time. So, for example, in Springfield, the total time of the forum is 20 minutes. So if you get 3 minutes, you're going to hear from 6 or 7 folks per forum. Portland, similarly. Berkeley, they do something interesting where the first forum of the month is 10 minutes long with 1 minute speaking time. The second forum of the month is unlimited. So they sort of took a hybrid approach. Boulder, you can see another large city that does sort of a 45-minute time limit. So it's not unreasonable. There are cities out there that are limiting the amount of time for the forum. I think it's safe to say, based on what Salem and Portland are doing, some of the bigger cities in Oregon, and from our anecdotal look at minutes from other cities, we likely have more folks testifying at forum than probably any other city in Oregon. And in looking at other cities around the country, we're probably towards the high end as well for what other cities are seeing. So you wanted a sense of where you stood in your process relative to other communities. This gives you a sense of that. So we have suggested some actions to address some of the things that you brought up, so here they are. This group of actions are administrative in nature, so if we heard nothing to the contrary from any of you tonight, we would move forward on these things immediately. So those, one of which we're already doing, posting new signage with behavior expectations. If you came up with new expectations, we would change that. Revising the mayor's script at the beginning of forum to be consistent with whatever those new behavior expectations are. There was also the suggestion that if the text changed each forum, folks might be more likely to tune in. The analogy one of you used was sort of the flight attendant and the speech you hear at the beginning of a flight. Nobody listens to it anymore because they all know what it is. And so maybe if it changed up, people would be more likely to listen to it. Providing suggestions to the community on what effective testimony might look like based on what it is you're looking for. Prohibiting handouts to council or the audience, so what we would do is require folks to put them in a box at the podium. That way they're not approaching you, they're not disseminating materials. Increasing outreach to community about public forums, so what we would do is just do more advertising on social media, on our website, through other mechanisms, so that your desire to hear from new voices, we can be getting word out about public forum as much as possible. And that we would start exploring the feasibility of taking public forum out into the community. Several of you brought that up. There's work that we want to do to find out what's involved with that. The technology requirements aren't minimal, and so we need to make sure that it's possible to go somewhere else and bring all the technology that we need and broadcast it and all that. But what we're willing to do is start exploring that feasibility and let you know what that would be. So these would be the items that we would just be moving forward on from an administrative standpoint. Another suggested action that we have is based on the conversations we had with you, which was that many of you supported the idea of a 2-minute testimony time limit. So you have a motion, suggested motion around that. And then there are a series of items for which there wasn't really consensus amongst you. There were sort of differing opinions. And so I think these are the items we would want to have either more discussion to move forward on, or you could think of these as we would do all the other things, including you could look at taking some action on the time limit, and then revisit in 6 months and say, did this produce the desired outcome? And if not, maybe we look at this list of items. So this could include some discussion about what is the purpose of public forum, so that you could have some language around that to communicate. Considering randomizing the order of speakers, so it would no longer be first in line. It would be, no matter when you arrive, we would just randomize the list. Consider grouping speakers by topic area. Having community members sign something, so if it's their sign-in form, having them sign that as a way of acknowledging the behavior expectations that we have of them. That's administratively relatively easy to do. Considering increased security, several of you mentioned the idea of having a second security officer here, maybe having a plainclothes officer somewhere in the audience. So that's another option that's out there for discussion. I think that's the last item there. Yes, it is. So.
Okay, that was very helpful and very specific, so thank you. I have Mike, Alan, Betty, and Claire, and Chris.
2 things to start for me. I like a lot of the administrative stuff I just saw up there as changes. Those all seem good. The 2 things are this. Number 1, we all know that this occurs. We might disagree about why. But I would suggest that all of us know that the residents of most of our public forum speakers is wards 1, 2, 3, and occasionally 7 and 8, but that 4, 5, and 6 residents almost never speak at public forums. I mean, it's at least 3 to 1. We ask people to say so. I can tell you maybe 2 or 3 times in the last year where someone from Ward 5 who doesn't work at the Chamber of Commerce or have a role where they're expected to speak to council, a resident who just wanted to come and speak, who felt comfortable to come and speak. I bring this up only because it's very, very real for most of my constituents that they're absolutely uncomfortable to come here and speak. They're a group that organized around an issue that was very important to them. It took me weeks to convince them that it was worth their while to come and speak to council, and when they did, they got shouted down, and it's the only time I've lost my cool at that table in 13 years, where I yelled back at the guy. And I don't believe at all, nor does anyone I've ever spoken to in Ward 5, that our public forum is a welcoming place for them. because their opinion is not correct. I hope we can work on that. I don't have a great solution for that other than I hope we really focus on that. The other issue is that, to go with the total tonnage thing, I brought up that one last item that was there, and I think this is worthwhile for us to consider. It occurs to me that many times people who speak frequently speak on the same subject, and we've heard them, and we've heard them well. We've heard them in depth. But as far as learning something new, that's not always the case. We have their name on the piece of paper they write. We often have their ward, so we can identify them as individuals. And I think the idea of giving people 15 minutes a year, whether it's in 2-minute or 3-minute increments, I don't care, but giving people 15 minutes a year is enough. Because that, if it's 3-minute increments, then they can speak 5 times a year. We have at most 20 public forum opportunities. How many, 18 after breaks? I don't know. But, you know, to be able to speak at least 5 of those, a third of all public forums, is not a handicap. But I think it would save tremendous amount of time, so.
Alan?
Yeah, I like the admin actions. I think those are worthy of pursuing. I guess, you know, the forum started with Mayor Tory, so it was more than 15 years ago, 2004, 5, somewhere in that range. And the purpose to me is to provide citizens an opportunity to bring new and relevant issues or complaints to the council's attention so that we can deal with them. And the forum is one of many ways that I get that information. I get that information through email, although that's more and more problematic. Email, social media, letters, postcards, calls, community meetings, texts, one-on-one encounters at the grocery store. We've all had that survey tool that we've got that we don't use very effectively. We've got staff memos, AISs, meetings, you know, it's like 10 or 12 different ways we get information to us. And the forum is one of those tools for us. That's what I think the purpose is. But lately what we've seen is the same people sometimes saying the same thing over and over again, not new voices and I'm not learning anything and I'm not getting any new information. It's just the same information. Sometimes it's not even relevant to anything that we're talking about, which is fine, I suppose. Although I don't want people wasting my time and the public's time by enhancing their Facebook posts. But, and I think that's all okay if it doesn't get in the way of the council getting its work done. But I think the forum is getting in the way of the council getting its work done. We've added fifth Wednesdays and third Mondays because we don't have enough time to discuss and deliberate on important issues. So, and I think the forum timeframe is often has a negative impact on our ability to have those discussions. And might be, and sometimes we're pushing off our stuff till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night when that's probably the worst time to have a substantive discussion and make a decision. And that's because the forums take too long. And so, as well, sometimes it's just diminishing returns, you know, after 10 or 15 people saying the same thing over and over again, or the third time they've come and said the same thing, as Mike noted, doesn't usually add much to my sense of their knowledge about the issue, especially when we have all these other venues that we have. So I think it's really in need of reform. I think we should promote alternative forums. I like the 2 minutes, a good start. I think we need to put time limits on it and maybe even frequency. If we want shorter forums, then maybe we do them twice a month. If we can have a longer forum, maybe once a month. That's not censorship, that's just time management because we're having a hard time getting our stuff done. And then finally, the first come, first serve system just really doesn't work very well at all. Maybe sorting people by items that are on our tentative agenda, so they're relevant to what we're talking about, go first, or a checkbox if you've talked to the council in the last 1 to 2 months, or maybe the 15-minute idea is a good one, so that it gets some kind of balance so we get towards new ideas and more and new information coming at us.
Okay. Betty?
I think it's one of the most valuable things we do. I think it's a place where anybody in the community can come and speak on anything. And they aren't just speaking to us, they're speaking to the public. Other people can watch it on the webcast, or see it on TV. And I think I'm totally opposed to limiting the total time. I think the 3 minutes is good, but I would never change the time if I were presiding. I think that if we're going to have 2 minutes, then we should advertise that it's 2 minutes. And not 3 minutes. And it's not true that it started with Jim Torrey. I spoke at a public forum before I was on council, and that was at least 25 years ago. And I think it was going on a long time ago. I know I was scared to death when I came in, looking at those people up there. And if someone had said, you can't, and I rehearsed the 3 minutes over and over, and if someone had said at the last minute, you have 2 minutes, I would have fallen apart, even though I've been a teacher and I've spoken lots of places, but it would have been really hard to change it at the last minute. I don't object to people saying the same thing over and over. They're saying it not just to us, but to the public. I do think that when a group come together, like the Raging Grannies, they should get more time than one person gets, because they have rehearsed, they've written something, rehearsed it, and we should have the courtesy to listen to them. I've never felt that it was dangerous. Sometimes it's been amusing and maybe a little scandalous or something, but I've never felt it was dangerous to have people here. I do know, I can't think of the subject now, but there was some subject where the people who didn't have the same liberal point of view didn't feel comfortable. I remember that. And that's unfortunate, but that's life. And I like having the people who have the initiative to get here and sign up early, going first rather than last. Sometimes I remember being at one, which was out at Churchill High School, that went on for hours, and then finally we had to go back the next night if we wanted to talk. That was about Hyundai.
That was Hyundai, I remember that.
Yes, I remember that. I went back the next night because I cared so much. My point of view didn't prevail, but still, I think I just think it's one of the best things we do. And I absolutely opposed to limiting the total time, limiting the number of times, and I'm opposed to changing the time at the last minute. If we want to make it 2 minutes, then people should know that it's 2 minutes. And they can rehearse that, and maybe we could cut our time down to 2 minutes sometimes too. Who knows? I don't know how long I've been talking now.
I think you've actually used up your time, so.
I've used up my time.
Yeah, there you go. And so it's 7 o'clock. I have 2 more counselors. I know we need, but I'm just going to extend for another 10 minutes. I hope you can all live with that. I need Jennifer also on my list. Okay, Claire, then Chris, then Jennifer.
Thank you. I agree. Public forum's very important. I do find it valuable. However, I don't think it should be a free-for-all or a place people use solely for their own personal agendas, as opposed to using it to express an opinion on community matters, especially topics that this council has actual authority over. But I know we can't tell people what they're going to say, so I'm just expressing my opinion about what public forum should be used for. I do have a question on this issue of a safe environment. So I wasn't able to attend that meeting at the library. I watched it on television, so I didn't necessarily wasn't able to see all the dynamics that were at play, but I understand there were some pretty hostile dynamics amongst folks in the audience. So what role does staff play in keeping the peace amongst folks who are sitting out here in our audience?
That's a great question. We don't really have a role at this time. I think if it elevated to a physical or some kind of a security threat, we do have security here, and we would probably take some sort of action. But
So So, sorry, I'm getting a cold and my head's not working great. So I think, there are interactions that happen up to before there's something physical that would call for security. And I think we need to explore what role staff could play in facilitating peacekeeping and creating a culture that is welcoming to all community members. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, and I don't know how other councils might handle that. But I also feel like we need to be prepared to enforce our standards. So we have some rules that we read, that the mayor reads at the beginning, and if we're not willing to actually enforce those rules, then they're meaningless. And again, I don't know what that might look like. It might mean asking someone to leave, that they are not conducting themselves in such a way that they should be here at public forum. It might mean cutting off the mic of a speaker. And I know those sound very dramatic, and I'm a free speech advocate, but this is a specific forum for a specific purpose. It is not a free-for-all. It is not the Wayne Morris Free Speech Plaza. And I think we need to have an expectation that when the public comes here to speak to us, that they conduct themselves in such a way, not just to respect this council, but to respect everyone else who's in this audience. And that's what I feel has been lacking from some of our recent public forums. So having said that, in terms of some more practical ideas, I would support trying the 2-minute time limit and obviously letting everyone know that's out there. Limiting time that we actually hold the forum for, I think would be another way to control things. And I'll beg your indulgence, I'm out of my time. I actually would support, I suggested randomizing the sign-up sheets because people game the system. There are certain individuals who make sure they go last. There are other people who always make sure they go first. And I think that's not fair to everybody else who's coming to speak, who don't necessarily know how to game the system or think that that's important.
Okay, Chris.
Thank you. 2 minutes, absolutely. Show me where to sign up. 2 minutes. I like the other administrative things you've done. Back to the notion of what is the public forum. I think it is an extremely important opportunity for people to come and speak to the council about issues that are important to them and are relevant to the city. I absolutely, positively do not believe the public forum should be entertainment in any way, shape, or form. They're not here to entertain us. They're not here to entertain the public. They're here to speak to the council on issues, not to provide entertainment. If they want entertainment, watch American Idol. Yep. And so I think in that sense, and I look at the times that other cities have put in place, the largest city in the state of Oregon has 25 minutes. And as you said yourself, we have the largest number of speakers who want to come and speak because we have enabled people to take advantage of the forum and use it for whatever purpose they want to. It's a privilege, not a right. And I think enforcing rules that say you need to use it for the purpose in which it was intended, which was to communicate with the council and not to entertain the public, is very important. And I think you can speak to the council in 2 minutes. I think you can speak very effectively to the council in 2 minutes. Now, if you want to entertain the public, you probably want all the time you can possibly get. I also really like the idea of randomizing the signups because there's no particular requirement that they be done in a certain order. I mean, if you want to bring 15 people to speak, all you're going to do is just make me angry. If I have to listen to the same thing 15 times, you haven't made your point, you've just made me angry. Okay. So I think we need to get a handle on the public forum. And I think looking for an amount of time that we will not go beyond, a maximum amount of time. The largest time I see on here is 45 minutes. I'd be willing to go for an hour and say but that's it, it's an hour. We'll do as many as we can in an hour. And I think all the other actions that you have, which say we need to exercise certain rules of decorum to discourage the sense of entitlement that I think a lot of people bring. I'm not talking liberal, I'm not talking conservative. I'm talking human beings who feel they're entitled to do or say whatever they want. I don't feel I'm entitled to do or say whatever I want. I can't swear or scream or insult people or be rude. But people feel they can come up to the podium and do that. I don't think that's reasonable, not in a public discourse. And so I think we need to be able to have an expectation that people will behave in an appropriate, polite, and respectful manner. So if you can organize some thoughts out of that, I think that would be useful for me. Absolutely 2 minutes. I think looking at a maximum time so that we can get our work done. But I absolutely do not believe public forum is the opportunity for people to just come here and entertain themselves or the public. It's an opportunity to speak to the council on important issues.
Jennifer.
Thank you. So I agree that a series of rules with actual consequences that people understand, these are the things I need to do, and if I choose not to do those, these are the consequences. I mean, I think we've seen the mayor struggling. There's nothing she can do, really, except for yell at them and wag her finger. I like the 2 minutes as long as we're not going to be cutting people to 1 minute. Like, if it's 2 minutes and we're like, 2 minutes is the 2 minutes, I am 100% okay with that. I also like the idea of the randomizing. I'd like to try it out, see how it goes. I think it's worth seeing how that would work. I do have a question. Have you guys, you talked about equity. Have you spoken, and maybe you guys have a background in equity, to an equity specialist? Because some of these things have a red flag for me, like if we limit it for the person and there's certain communities where very few of those people are willing to come out and testify, they have a smaller pool of people who would come, and so then they're going to eat up their whatever 15 minutes a lot faster. And so there might be some other things I haven't even thought of that someone that's an expert in this area would probably be able to see right away. It might be worth, before we come back, having someone take a look.
Any other comments? I want to kind of.
Greg.
Oh, Greg, go for it.
Yeah, I'm fully in favor of 2 minutes. I think that is enough time for people to get their point across. The other thing, doing a card shuffle on the signups, I'm definitely in favor of that. But I want to get to the access issue. I think it's really important that we go out from time to time outside of this venue, and maybe it's a school, it's, some other community facility we go to, but I think that we need to be out in the public, not just here. And, I can tell you, I can count the numbers of times, literally on the fingers of my two hands, that I've had people from Ward 6 show up. One time that they did show up in mass when we were talking about cutting library services in Bethel. Then they came out.
Ward 5 comes to.
Yeah, so we really need to be more user-friendly and, allow for people, this will get new people involved, other people who have not felt that they could be involved. The buses don't run that often at night, and it's a long way out to Barger, okay? So, somebody has to take off early from work or whatever the case may be. They got to come in, and that may take them some time to do that on the bus. And then, they do the 2 minutes or whatever the case may be, and then they got to go back out and catch a bus. If they have to stay here till 10 o'clock, they probably are not going to get a bus for like an hour. An hour. And, then if they have to if the bus stop's not close to their house, they got to get off and walk, some distance to their house. So, yeah, those are things that I think we should really be focused on. And I really like the idea of limiting time to 45 minutes or an hour.
Emily.
I think public forum is one of the most important things we do, and I feel very protective of it. 2 minutes would be fine with me as long as we can stick to 2 minutes. Having come to forum to speak many times in the distant past, it's really unsettling to have it cut, especially if you're not used to speaking here. I think randomizing is interesting idea. I'm a little concerned about the idea of limiting the time to as short as 45 minutes with the huge numbers of people we get. So I might be willing to go to an hour and a half, but I'm nervous about cutting people out. But I really think a forum is important. Thank you.
I want to just add a kind of clarifying comment. I'm hearing we have a motion potentially to cut this to 2 minutes. There seems to be a lot of commitment around randomizing the numbers, the sequence. Just a thought for all of you that if you randomize, some people will come early to sign up early because they have to go pick up a child from a babysitter or something. I mean, there's a reason for them to get in the top of the queue. But if you also limited the length of time to, say, an hour, then even if they're randomized, they know they're not going to wait longer than an hour. And so that might help mediate that. So I think we're ready for a motion. Yes, Alan. Oh, okay, well, maybe not.
I'll make
Okay.
it. If you- oh, you-
Wait,
I'll make a motion.
you're going to make a motion? Okay.
I move to limit testimony to 2 minutes, that we limit the time to 2 times a month to 1 hour, and that we randomize the order of people speaking once they've signed up.
Second?
Claire.
So I will support this motion. I think people will adjust to what is provided for by the rules. So our rules provide for what it provides now, so we get the results that we get. If we set up a different a different type of infrastructure, people will adopt. So people who want to do sequential testimony, once it's randomized, they'll just have to pass each other's testimony and, be flexible. I think people will figure it out.
They're smart.
Emily?
I forgot what I was going to say. It was important. I guess unless it comes back, I
Okay.
can't say it.
So, all right, let's see,
Mike can go first.
Mike and Jennifer.
I'm assuming this is taking into account that we're going to do all the administrative things that you said you were going to do, right? I liked what Jennifer said, and it's not in the motion and it wasn't in yours, but I think we should be specific and posted information that flagrant abuse of the rules can result in loss of speaking privileges at the public forum.
Is that a friendly?
Yes, it is a friendly.
Isn't that part of the administrative?
I didn't see it on the administrative rules, the
Revise it,
clarity
well.
around
Make it friendly, and then we make sure it's there.
Sure. So they can absorb it as administrative.
Have like yellow cards and red cards.
Yeah. Hey, man, I'm just saying.
Okay,
My motion did assume that all the administrative stuff
Yeah.
was going to happen, including go to different venues.
Jennifer.
Yeah, is this a pilot or permanent? Because I'm a little uncomfortable with the hour, but I'm willing to try it if we discuss it maybe in 6 months.
I think pilot is appropriate.
We can always overrule or
Pilot, right.
You can always change the
You
motion.
can always change, yeah.
Or make another motion.
Okay, yes, Emily?
I really have a problem with this motion in that there's several questions put together. And there's some parts I like and some parts I don't like. When this happens, I have to vote no. And I would really like to separate the issues, but I also know we're running out of time. So I don't know what to do about that.
You can move to divide.
I would like to move to divide, but there's so many issues that are on there right now,
So it could be divided into 3, which would be the 2-minute time limit, the 60-minute max per, and then the randomized list.
I would move to separate those 3.
Second.
All right, okay. And discussion on that? So we would move on we need a motion
To separate.
to
Separate.
to separate. All in favor of separating? 1, 2, 3, 4. All opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I'm going to support to separate. Okay. All right, so now the first motion is on 2 minutes.
Can I just, also another process check-in?
Okay.
So at your Wednesday work session, you may have some additional time on Wednesday. We took the cap action off, but I am putting another item on, but I don't believe it'll take 45 minutes. So you may just have a little bit of time on Wednesday to finalize your vote.
Mike?
Move to postpone and table this until Wednesday.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that's a very good idea. Thank you very much, and we're adjourned for 15 minutes.